Whenever you're ready.
Okay. Would it surprise you to know that an estimated 18 million acres, roughly the size of Panama, are lost each year due to deforestation? That's according to the United Nations Food and Agriculture Organization. As you may have figured out, today I'll be illustrating to you the severity of deforestation. Just because we don't live in a forest, the severity of deforestation still affects us from thousands of miles away. Today I'll discuss with you what deforestation is, what the major effects are, and what we can do to help prevent further damage. In the simplest terms, according to Merriam-Webster Dictionary, deforestation is an act or result of burning down all trees in an area. But in reality, deforestation has so many more details than that. Deforestation is a result of many things, but according to the United Nations Framework Convention on Climate Change, local farming is responsible for 48%, commercial agriculture is responsible for 32%, and logging is responsible for 14%. Which is mostly done illegally. Farming is responsible for such a large portion of deforestation because over the years the population has increased around these areas, and the people who live around the forest rely on it for food, shelter, and even firewood. Commercial agriculture can also include logging and any plant provided by the forest that people grow and sell for a profit. Now that you have some background on deforestation, let's talk about the effects. Deforestation can be held responsible for many problems, but it is said to be one of the main factors of global warming. Trees take in carbon from the air and release oxygen during photosynthesis. As you can see in the diagram, what happens is during photosynthesis, the trees take in the CO2 and they store it. But when the trees are cut down, all the CO2 that was stored within the tree is released back into the atmosphere. And that CO2 takes in heat and it traps all the heat under the atmosphere. So then the earth keeps warm, it stays warm. Because carbon is a gas that traps the heat in the atmosphere, it takes deforestation. It makes deforestation a main source of global warming. According to the Greenpeace organization, deforestation is a major driver of global warming, responsible for up to 20% of global greenhouse gas emissions, more than all the cars, trucks, planes, boats, and trains in the world combined. Other more local problems are things like animal and plant extinction. Because the forests provide food and habitats for animals, when they are cut down, they lose their homes and die off. This is like the most endangered species that lives in the rainforest, in the Amazon rainforest. It's called the lesser mouse lemur. It's kind of cute and it's kind of sad. Now that you know about some of the problems deforestation has caused, let's talk about how we can further prevent damage to our environment. There are many things we can do to help deforestation, not only in large groups, but as individuals. One thing that can quickly decrease deforestation is if corporations cooperated and only bought from suppliers that didn't obtain their products through commercial agriculture. So if corporations boycotted or tried to buy products that weren't obtained through deforestation, then it would lower a lot of it because the money, that's all they want. So things we can do as individuals are things like recycle and buy recycled goods. Today I've talked about what deforestation is, what the major effects are, and what we can do to prevent further damage. Now that you know deforestation is a growing issue, hopefully you will think twice and make better choices to help prevent further damage.
Carlos, share with us your thoughts.
Deforestation is a pretty serious thing, and she explained it very well, but I feel like she could have spoke to us more. You were kind of reading off the thing a lot, maybe too much. probably would do the same thing when I do my speech. But
No, you won't, because we're warning you not to do that.
but that mouse thing or whatever it was kind of ugly. So I'm glad it's very endangered. Or whatever it was.
Mouse lemur.
But anyways, it was a good statistics and stuff. Yeah. I don't know what to say.
We've been sitting here for 8 weeks talking about all this stuff, and you don't know what to say. I've been talking about all kinds of things for you to talk
okay,
about. Was it easy for you to follow?
Yeah, kind of. Well, how you were saying, let's talk about so-and-so. I remember you said not to do that, right? Just talk about it. Don't tell us what you're going to talk about.
I don't remember. You know, I'm not sure I understand the reference you're making, but let's. Oh, I don't want to. Yeah, you don't want to use the phrase "let's talk" or "let's." Yeah, that's.
She
Okay.
used that a few times.
All right. Okay. Well, you found a few things here and there to mention. That's okay. I like the attention device. I thought you had a good set of statistics to get our attention, and you tie it into something that is significant that the audience should be able to relate to and care about. And so I think the introduction of the subject is pretty good. As a matter of fact, most of the opening section is pretty solid. There's a pretty clear statement of what your point is, your purpose statement. There's a very good preview of what the supporting structure is going to be. Now, it's presented a little mechanically, so I know that you are, now, let me hit the checkpoint. Here's an attention device, check. Here's the thesis statement, check. Here's the preview, check. So it needs to be a little bit more natural than that, and part of the problem is that you're reading instead of just talking to us. So I think that that's the beginning of a couple of issues that you have. Now, when you get to the individual points, by the way, first of all, the first visual, I have no idea what that was. There's not really any explanation of it. I assume it's got something to do with the farmland and where deforestation is going on. I just thought it was a development someplace and, you know, here where the streets are going to be. I don't really know what the point was of that. Now, there may be a way that you wanted to use it, but you didn't really use it and explain it in the presentation. The explanation of CO2 in the atmosphere doesn't sound accurate to me. It sounds like you've got, you know that there's a CO2 relationship with the trees, and obviously you've got some data that talks about how that contributes to global warming. So that part's pretty good. But your explanation of the process felt very incomplete to me. And even though you have a very elaborate visual for that point, I felt a little bit like I wasn't really getting as much out of it as I should have. And I think the process, you talk about it, releasing the CO2, my understanding is that the CO2 is absorbed by the trees and, it's replaced with oxygen. So it's kind of like oxygen's a byproduct of transforming the CO2 for the trees. So it's not like if you cut down the tree, it's been storing up all this CO2 like fat. Like us, if we die and all the fat goes out there and it burns down the atmosphere or creates global warming because of all our fat gathers, I don't think that's the way it works. So that just doesn't sound complete and accurate. Structurally, you've got everything signposted and you have transitions. The transitions need to be a little bit smoother. You need to talk to the audience and tell us a little bit about these things. You're really kind of going through the material and it's all being read. You are not speaking to the audience. This is an essay that you're reading out loud. And there's stuff that's missing in it. I like the idea when although Carlos is happy to be rid of the mouse lemur, I think mouse lemur looks kind of cute. And why is it important that we have divergent species? Why is losing a species a bad thing? Are there other kinds of species that are going to get lost as a result of this sort of thing? And what's the impact of a lack of biodiversity? There are stories to be told here, ideas to be shared, and it just doesn't seem like it's going anywhere. Your third point sounds like the speech has suddenly become a persuasive speech. And now here's what I want you to do in response to this particular problem. So you've gone basically the first two parts are the problem, and the third point is the solution. And when you're advocating that we take an action or do something, then you are really to the point where you're making a persuasive speech rather than an informative presentation. And persuasion requires a lot more effort. And you're not. I don't think you put in more effort on the third point than you did on the other points. You had some good information there, a couple of things, but it's not being developed as an argument or an emotional pull on us. It's just, let me describe to you how we could fix this problem. And it felt a little bit underdeveloped. Like I said, I thought you handled the visuals pretty well. Didn't always explain them as well as they should have been. And I gotta yell at you about the reading to us. That I didn't want. The only notes that you ought to have, maybe 3 index cards. One index card that has your structure on it, and the other 2 have the quotes or the statistics on it. And other than that, it's got to be really, really just the outline sort of thing, because otherwise that's what you do. You're just tempted to, well, I've got it all written out here for me, I'll just read it instead of talking to the audience and relating to the audience. All right, and it was 4 minutes, just in case.